Okay. This is also a little bit of a high school reunion for Jackie and I because we went to high school together. So this is, we're just catching up, but there's an audience full of people watching us too. So I have just been super enthralled in your journey and super inspired by what you're currently building right now with Sprout. But before we get into that, I know you did have quite a lengthy journey before becoming an entrepreneur and other startup experience. So can you speak to a little bit about what you were doing before you decided to become a founder?
Absolutely. So definitely not the traditional path to entrepreneurship. I went to Queen's, got my commerce degree, and immediately went into investment banking, which I don't know if there are any investment bankers in the room. Raise your hand. Okay, 2. Okay. Well, it's very treacherous, not a lot of sleep, but really good learning in terms of like technical skills, understanding a lot of different business models, and kind of just understanding like how companies are built. And through that, I realized I really wanted to go to the other side, which is investing, which is actually making long-term commitments in investing in companies to fuel their growth and watching them grow over the longer term. And so I joined CPP, the Canadian pension plan, where I was in the direct private equity group there for 3.5 years. We invested in really big companies, so our smallest check was probably $500 million to $1 billion, so massive businesses, private, take privates, et cetera. And through that opportunity, I actually did a secondment, luckily before COVID, with a packaging company based in Chicago. And I worked on a value creation project there for 4 months with the CFO. And through that experience, I really learned firsthand, like, wow, it's actually awesome to be at a company in an operation role where you're really delivering and driving value creation initiatives. So from there, I decided to jump ship and join Properly, which was a prop tech company based in Toronto. We had presence in Toronto and Vancouver, where we really allowed you to buy before you sold your home. So it's focused on the consumer residential real estate market. I was the chief of staff there, so I spent a lot of time across the whole company, from strategy to fundraising to finance, and then I ended up landing myself in a product role, which was awesome to, for the first time for me, really like work with product managers, work with engineers, and build products from 0 to 1. So I'll pause there because that kind of lends itself to how I got into starting a company.
Yeah, so that's great. So 2 things I kind of want to call out from what you said. I don't think, including myself, many of us like understand a chief of staff like title. I think it's a lot of like human resources like misconceptions. So just could you even speak a little bit more to like what you were doing in that role, and also did it prepare you on another level for entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so are there any chief of staffs in the room? Are there any aspiring chief of staffs in the room?
Maybe after your answer there might be.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to write a job description for a chief of staff. I think ultimately it comes down to what is the founder's priority at that certain time in which they're hiring for the role, and then how can you actually help them achieve that? Essentially, like, if there's 3 priorities for a CEO or a co-founder, you're tackling 2 of them. They're tackling like the most important, almost like outward-facing initiatives at the company, and then you're supporting everything else. You jump in where there are gaps in the team. So, for example, at Properly, we had gaps at the time that I was there in our like data and analytics, and that was a background I had a strong skill set in, and so I really helped like build out that function in our finance team. And then I really supported their fundraising, which was also a skill set that I had, I guess, from my investing background. So not a great answer what you do. I've heard chief of staffs do a lot of different things, from like managing hiring, supporting with HR, the HR function. So essentially, like, to wrap it all up, it's like, where is their priority in the business, where there's a gap, and that's really where you jump in.
I think that was a great answer. And it also helps me understand the role too, because I agree. I think it's very complex, and it's probably going to be different from startup to startup or company to company. One thing that you did call out was obviously your experience working with Properly. So just given what you're doing now, and it's related to obviously health tech, so what was the transition going from kind of like one vertical to the other? And did you think it was something that maybe other founders should go, they don't need to stay in their lane, so to say? They can really very much branch out in terms of moving from one kind of like industry to another.
Yeah, so definitely a lot of differences between fertility, which is, I haven't even announced what Sprout does, but I guess we'll get there.
We'll get there, yeah.
between fertility and real estate. But what I would say when you're switching industries, like as you think about the skills that you're getting in an operational role, it's really about understanding, is there a market for the thing that you're building and the product that you're building, and then how do you scale that business? So a lot of what we took, my co-founder and I, we both worked at Properly. There were a lot of transferable skills that we could take into our company building. But I think if you don't have industry experience in the industry that you're building your company or thinking about building your company, and you have to have like a deep-rooted passion for the problem and the industry and the market that you're selling into, because that's ultimately what's going to fuel you to get up to speed, to build your network of people in that industry, and also just be an innovator in the space and a thought leader. But I drew a lot of parallels, funny enough, between our time at Properly and our time at Sprout, where we primarily are a fertility benefits provider. So we have a digital health platform, and we provide fertility benefits to employers so that their employees can have access to the right type of care and financial coverage that they need if they're pursuing different family building aspirations like egg freezing, IVF, adoption, and surrogacy. But we sell through insurance brokers. This was not a market that we knew super well, but a lot of similarities with how real estate is sold through real estate agents. And so we had experience at Properly, like building and scaling a team. At one point, I think we had over 150 agents at Properly. And so we were able to leverage a lot of those skills in terms of actually building out our go-to-market motion and the operational capabilities, but just with a slightly different type of person, which is the brokers.
Right, and thank you for also kind of introing Sprout a little bit, because I was going to kind of transition into that next. But obviously, you did touch on what it is you're doing and who you're working with, but it's so multifaceted, and we've had conversations kind of off stage about this. So there's a component about like the educational aspect and just really kind of advocating for something that's really missing here in healthcare within Canada. So how is Sprout solving this problem, and how are you advocating for these kinds of conversations to be happening?
Yeah, so I guess I'll first talk about how, like, my kind of founder story and why we started Sprout. So through investment banking, through private equity, and then through Properly, I had a lot of health concerns where, I had lost my period for 5 years. I went to doctors. They were like, well, there's nothing we can do until you try to have kids. That was super frustrating for me, because I feel like as women specifically, we should have access to reproductive health education so that we can plan for our futures. But second to that, my parents actually went through infertility and struggled through that in the 90s when they were trying to build our family. So my brother was actually adopted as a means to start building our family. And then within the same year, my parents were introduced to a reproductive endocrinologist based in New York and then they went through IVF, and my twin and I were born through that. So there's always been conversations in our household of, embracing all these diverse pathways to parenthood. And for me specifically, working in primarily male-dominated industry, I was like, wow, like women really need, and men need, better support in the workplace, especially when you think about, our biological clocks, where it basically like directly conflicts with us pursuing our careers, but also thinking about family, which for many people is something that is prioritized at that time. And now I'm blanking on the question. Oh, what we do. Yeah. So the product that we built is basically a digital health platform. So we primarily sell through the insurance and employer benefit market. So we have a digital health platform, and that allows people to get access to education, virtual care, so similar to Maple, if anyone's familiar with Maple, the telehealth platform. We have nurses that are available to book on demand. They can give you second opinions, consultations, really help you from more of a medical perspective on what your next steps are. And then we have a financial benefit that's called Sprout Pay, and that basically allows employers to add on a flexible lifetime maximum that allows individuals to access real dollars that can go towards their fertility treatment. And why this is so important is because, especially in Canada, we basically have these zones within our country that I call reproductive health deserts. So basically, like, all the fertility clinics are located in Vancouver and Toronto, and so that means that a significant amount of our population is without even access to basic care, and that's really problematic. So that was one of the reasons why we decided to build out this virtual care platform that supports people and provides them access to the care that they need.
And what did, because again, a lot of aspiring builders here who probably have, and I love that you're going off of like personal inspiration and experience and just seeing a gap and solving that, but what did maybe step 1 and 2, like you have an idea, you've got your co-founder who you met at your previous startup, so what did step 1 look like for the building process and kind of putting it all together?
Yeah, so we were in a very unique situation where the previous company we were working at was being sold. So we basically had this like 6-month time window to decide, okay, are we going to go get a new job? But at the time we started the company, I guess officially May 2023. At the time, the job market was really bad. And so we were like, well, there's not many roles out there that we'd want to be working at. And so we kind of just embarked on like a crazy research project. Honestly, it felt like we were in entrepreneurship 101, like university class, where it was like building a business plan, doing a bunch of research. I feel like the first 2 weeks when we decided to jump in and do it was doing as much research as we can on like what companies existed that were solving this problem, what were the different business models, whether they were like B2B, direct to consumer. And then I got utterly obsessed with the 3 US companies and their co-founders and CEOs. And I listened to literally every single podcast where I would walk around the house and like talk about them as if I knew exactly who they are. And so that was the first step. And this document basically ended up being like a 30-page, 50-page document on like every single possible note that I could take about the industry and understanding like, is this model legitimate, and like could we build a sizable company that we could activate in the Canadian market? And then the second piece before we decided to go all in was like, you need to do customer research and actually validate, is this a real problem that people are willing to pay for? So we primarily sell to HR leaders and insurance companies. So I think we interviewed like 30 to 40 HR leaders in the Canadian ecosystem to understand like what are their pain points? Are they hearing about this from employees? And then that really validated, okay, one, we like understand the business model, but then two, you know, when we go build this product, can we actually go out to the market and will this resonate?
Yeah, and you just kind of used a buzzword a little bit with just saying like market. So introducing product business concept to the market, do you have any best practices or anything that you can take away that you can share with others trying to do the same thing?
Yeah, I guess, so it's been, we officially launched our product in the market last January, so it's been a year basically since we were in market. We have a handful of customers, which has been really exciting. What we did initially, which I think worked for us, was that when we launched last year, we actually brought on 5 design partners. These were companies where they expressed an interest in not only like testing this out for their employees, but also identify that this was like an actual pain point that they were dealing with and that they would pay for it. So you never want to go to a design partner and sign them on and have them like not pay for it or say that they don't have budget for it, because otherwise when you go to convert, they're not actually going to convert. And you don't want to give yourself that false hope. So that really enabled us last year to get on board a bunch of users and learn really quickly about like what was resonating, what was good about our service, and how can we like move on really quickly. And I think the other mentality that we had was just like ship fast, fail fast. I know a lot of companies will spend years building before they announce their product to the world, which like could work for you, but for us, we knew that we were on a tight schedule. So when we decided to start the company, we were like, okay, we're gonna start in May. By December, if we don't have any design partners or customers, we're shutting the company down. And then like December came, we're like, okay, we have some customers, like, okay, let's see where it goes in June. And then, you know, by June came, we had like our whole other set of priorities and milestones. So we just wanted to get it out there as quickly as possible. And the way that our service, our MVP was built was essentially like a very lo-fi tech platform with me and my co-founder and our CTO in the background, like actually doing a lot of the work.
And just a couple more questions, because I want the audience to be able to jump in with theirs. But obviously, just given your vast like investor experience, just what you were doing before being a founder, and even just probably currently from having like fundraising investor type conversations, do you have anything that you've learned that's been valuable that you can also share with others? I know there's been great takeaways with fundraising tonight, but do you have any from your perspective?
Yeah, fundraising is really hard. It will knock you down and make you feel like you're a failure so many times, because I don't know what the exact stats are, but it's like for every 100 people that you reach out to, like you might get a yes. So it's a lot of pitching yourself. And in the early days, it's not just like pitching your company, you're actually pitching yourself, because investors early on are really just investing in you and your co-founders and the team that you have behind you. And so I think a lot of the other speakers spoke really well about just giving yourself the space and time and picking the right partners, because when we went to fundraise, we actually just closed our pre-seed round in October, so that's exciting.
Congratulations.
And we were very intentional about like going out to investors where we knew that they had a particular interest in like women's health or femtech or healthcare more broadly, because those were the investors that would be a bit more interested and already up to speed on the market. There's a lot of different funds, many funds in North America. I mean, the Canadian landscape, there aren't as many, but in the US, there are a lot as well. And they all have their own investment thesis and strategy. Just like don't waste your time on funds that have no thesis that's aligned with what you're building, because you're just gonna pitch to them and you're gonna get a no and you're gonna feel bad. And so for us, like we were very prepared going into our pre-seed round. Given my experience in private equity, I like knew exactly how to structure a data room. I knew how to build our model. I knew how to build our product deck, and I knew how to structure everything in a way that when it was delivered to investors, it was almost like it answered all their questions. And I think to the extent you can be extremely prepared when you're going into the fundraising, the better you're going to get. But also like make sure you feel out investors early on. Like if you're getting a mixed feeling, just be direct with them and say like, hey, is this like something that you're interested in? If not, that's fine. I want to move on. Because I find a lot of times, especially in the Canadian market, there's like a lot of wishy-washy feelings of people not wanting to commit, but also not saying no right away. And so that can be really draining on your time as a founder, and especially as an early stage founder when, for us, there were 3 people on our team. So when me and Suze were out fundraising, who's working on the business, like there's a lot of tension that exists at that time.
Which is what was brought up tonight too. It's like you have to be okay, obviously, stepping away. Was it more challenging for you to fundraise and have these conversations, maybe based on like your industry or what you were building? Did you find that?
Yeah. So some of the stats are, so women in VC represents about 20% of the demographic breakdown, but women-led businesses in Canada represent 17.5% of companies, but only receive 2% of VC funding. So boo. Not only are we disadvantaged just from the onset of us being 2 female co-founders, we also are building a business that has historically been fit into a category of women's health. And I know that you had a question around storytelling, and I think that's where this comes in. It's super, super important. When you're fundraising and you're talking to investors who don't immediately resonate with the problem, you really need to lean into storytelling and put them in a position where they can understand, okay, I have a friend that's gone through this. I have, my wife went through 3 rounds of IVF, and like, this is a real big problem, and I want to help solve this. That was really, really important for us because we needed to find ways to attract people to want to learn more. And without the use of storytelling, that's really difficult to do.
And just one last question for you. And again, you're kind of touching on some great points that we have heard about, again, the importance of the right kinds of investors for your business, because it truly is important to the mission of what you're doing. Eldon hit on this earlier. You kind of have to be a little crazy to be a founder and to want to do this on your own and build and sacrifice. And you said going from investment banking to this, where you kind of had a very crazy life. Going to something that is probably crazier in many ways. So what's been the best takeaway about being a founder and about the entrepreneurship experience that you can share with everyone?
Yeah, so it takes a lot of grit and resilience, and I think that enables you to be just gain a skill set that you could never imagine gaining. So when I reflect back on our last 2 years, like the amount that I've learned about people and building relationships and building a product is just unmatched. Like you'll never get that in any other role. At times it feels crazy, both from like a personal life perspective, financial perspective. It is really difficult, but what keeps me grounded is what is the problem we're actually solving, and talking to our customers on a daily basis is so important for me to like fuel and motivate me. I think having worked in the chief of staff role at Properly was the main reason why I felt confident enough to jump into this role. Had I just done investment banking and private equity, I wouldn't even have known where to start. I wouldn't have had the resources or support network. And through that experience, I was able to get access to a ton of amazing mentors that have supported us, many of which became like early angel investors in the company.
Well, I love your passion, and you're doing something really important, and you're filling a major gap in our healthcare space here in Canada. Can I get a round of applause, please, for Jackie?